Hello, hello, hello. Wanted to go ahead and get this uploaded for you guys with regards to a resume that is more applicant tracking friendly, because as we know, a lot of companies are now running their applications through ATS, and sometimes our resumes are so busy that depending on the sensitivity of the system, it may kick it out. So that includes photos, that includes color, that includes texts. For instance, in my very first video of that resume transformation, that may be a resume that gets kicked out. However, I'm not sure if that's the case because it just really depends. So I'm going to walk you guys through what an applicant tracking system friendly resume looks like. Okay, so I'll go ahead and share my screen. All right, so this is, and I'm looking this way because this is where my other screen is. This is my resume, 2 pages long. And as you can see, my experience really only spans, I only go back about almost 10 years. I could have gone further back, but I think I've already explained this. Relevant job experience is really going to be 7 to 10 years, unless you're trying to show tenure or unless you're trying to show that you were in one field that you left and now you're trying to get back into that same field. So, because I'm not really trying to show tenure, I'm showing my experience as far as being relevant for what I'm applying for. I'm going to just go out 7 to 10 years because that's my relevant experience. So I'm going to go ahead and blow this up for you. And we'll start at the top. So as you can see, the only bit of color on this resume is that line, which separates my contact information from the rest of the resume. I could make it black, but I'm a purple person, so I like to have a splash of purple in my resume. Okay. One thing I want you to notice is that the formatting is very, very simple. It's simple so that it is easy to read. Look at my fonts. Everything is pretty much uniformed and the same. So when it comes to your fonts, you want to make sure that you use an easy to read font. No scripts, not a lot of italicized information here because remember, it has to go through a system. So you're looking at using Calibri, which if you look at the top, my resume is done in a Calibri, and you want to keep it about a 10.5, maybe up to a 12. 10.5 is sufficient, and it's also going to ensure that you're compacting that information into fewer pages if needed. My margins are normal margins. You want to make sure they're between 0.5 and 1 inches. And as you can see, there's plenty of space here on my sides all the way down. Also, if you look at the top of my page where my name and my contact information is, it's not in the header, right? Because you don't need that header to continue on every page. What you need to do is just number your pages. If you look at my page 2, there's my name, my email address, and the page number. I didn't have to put this, but because I understand they get so many resumes, I'm going to tie my name and my contact information to that page 2 in case they pass my resume on to someone else. They may print it out and hand it to someone. You never know what a screening process consists of. So I'm going to tie any of my additional pages back to me with my contact information, just in case. So that's the first point. You want to avoid tables and text boxes, not a lot of underlining, not a lot of shading or fancy graphics. Again, you don't want to add any photos. Anything that the tracking system cannot read is what you want to avoid because otherwise it will spit the information out. For instance, sometimes, and I still do this just because it's out of habit, I will place my technical skills or area of expertise into a table. because for aligning purposes, I told you guys I am a resume snob. So for alignment purposes, I like to have my information kind of structured and evenly spread across the document. But instead of using a text box or a table, I can just list them the way that I have them. And it helps to navigate, going through the applicant tracking system. I did enter the little space gaps here, those little bars, because I want there to be a separation. A bullet point could have worked, a dot could have worked, anything else could have worked. But again, I want it to be symmetrically appropriate. So that's just a preference. We're going to scroll up. As you can see, city, state, zip code. Sometimes I don't use a zip code, sometimes I do. Um, Reason being, I don't want anyone to be able to Google my zip code to see what the area looks like that I live in. People do things. People are people. They're going to do things that they want to do, even though they probably shouldn't. And I think investigating where your candidates are coming from is one of those things that you should not be even thinking about. So for that reason, I remove it sometimes. It really just depends on the role I'm applying for. Phone number is on there, as well as a professional email. Now, usually it's my first name, last name, right? But a professional email is going to be appropriate. Please do not put an email address that you had while you were in high school. If you are of a certain age and looking for a job, make your email as concise as possible. We don't want to see Twerkalicious. We don't want to see Black Diamond Diva. Please, name, birth year at Gmail, or however you put it up. Just make sure it's something that's professional. And then I have my LinkedIn page so that it's easy for them to just grab that, copy paste, and add that into LinkedIn to do a search. The reason I do this is because I don't want there to be any secrets, right? I don't want to have to think in my head whether or not they're going to do research on me to see what type of person I am. If there's bias, what are they going to try to figure out about me? Because remember, when I'm applying, I'm uploading my resume. But if the system is saying enter your legal first name, I have to then enter my legal first name. And my legal first name is a dead giveaway for everything concerning me. So I'd rather give them my LinkedIn information. So if you want to be nosy, you want to know my race, you want to know what I look like to try to determine and guess my age, I'm going to give you that so I don't have to wonder whether or not you're doing it. I'm opening the door for you to do it, right? So let's go down to the professional summary. My professional summary is branded, which means it's always going to include what the job title is that I'm seeking. If this was going to be for an executive HR vice president, then the title of my professional summary would say Vice President of Human Resources. And then I would make sure that my summary aligns with exactly what they're looking for, in addition to kind of pinpointing some of the things that I have experience in as it relates to their requirements. I hope that makes sense. So that's there. You want to make sure that when you're using your summary, when you're developing your summary, that you steer clear of using personal pronouns. You don't want to say I, me, our, we, none of those. Speak about yourself as a third person, respected human resources director, known for blending strategic thinking, blah, 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 blah. Then I go into my characteristics, strategic and methodical, adept at developing, cultivates strong relationships. Don't talk about yourself in third person, or don't talk about yourself in first person as I created, I did this. You never want to do that. You want to just speak to whatever the action was that you did. Okay. Also, when you're working on, even within the body of your resume, you want to make sure that you limit as many acronyms as possible. You want to spell out whatever it is that you're referring to. Now, of course, since this is for HR, I'm going to say HR. Everyone knows what HR is. But if I said ATS unless you knew that that meant Applicant Tracking System. What is ATS, right? You want to make sure that when you're using system names, that if that system is already an acronym that everyone knows it for, that's fine. But if there's something that we don't know that is not well known, then you need to spell it out. For instance, ADP. ADP is known for being ADP. I don't know what that stands for, but what I do know is that everyone else knows what ADP is. Same thing with SAP. Don't know what it stands for, but I know it's a system that everyone uses, and that's the name that it's called by. So you want to make sure that you eliminate any specific synonyms or acronyms that are directly related to whatever company or field you're talking about, because it may not be well known. Okay. All right. Let's scroll down to, well, I talk about areas of expertise and technical skills. Technical skills are anything that you do. And I'm speaking from just a office position, not necessarily a field position. Technical skills will relate to anything that you do that's tied to a computer. So any of those systems that you have access to, no matter how many years ago, if you've had exposure to it, add it. If you haven't had exposure to it and it's listed in the body of the job description, my recommendation would be to do some research on it, because sometimes these systems, although they're different systems and they operate under different companies and different names, they're the same system. If you could navigate Oracle on the people side, you could navigate Bamboo HR on the people side. If you could navigate ADP Workforce Now on the people side, same thing. If you could navigate Paycom, then by all means, you can navigate Paycor. So if there's a specific system that they're saying, we need you to have experience in this system, do your research and see what you have experience in that's comparable to what they're seeking. Okay. That's going to be most helpful. Also, with the areas of expertise, start with your strongest skill and then tread down from there. For me, in the roles that I seek, having a global presence or global knowledge is most relevant. So I'm going to speak to my experience with global tech, not with global policies and global workforce, because that's what's most relevant with the positions that I apply for. Okay. One more thing about the branding component. You want to make sure that it just really defines what your experience is, that the statement is just summarized. You don't want more than 4 sentences, and you have to consider this as your pitch. So if you were in an elevator and you wanted to give someone a quick summary about what you do before you get to the floor, before they exit the elevator. Not a lot of people know that example, but it's called an elevator pitch. And it's really just a quick way to sell yourself or sell your idea on someone where you have a very short amount of time to connect with that person. And to be honest with you, most recruiters won't spend more than 6 to 7, maybe 9 seconds looking at a resume. And they're always going to start with that summary. And then they'll skim. And I'll show you what they're going to skim for in a second. So I talked about technical skills. I talked about areas of expertise. And now your people skills are also a way to define some skills that you have. And it can be added within the technical skills, even if you just said skills, right? You can add them together. Or you can say competencies. There's different ways to title it. You have to do what works best for you. Okay. All right, so let's go down to your experience. So as you can see, I start with the company name, location, and the years of employment. Company name, location, years of employment, and then my job title is underneath. Now, this was really literally my entire job title. I put the Lima USA on there because it was a Italian entity. It was based in Italy. And so I want them to know I was the regional manager in the global HR department specific to Lima USA. So make sure that your job title makes sense. One thing I want you guys to know is that job titles kind of define your level of experience. And I don't know if you pay attention, but in your payroll system, whatever system is used for your payroll, what they call you in your day-to-day in your email signature sometimes differs from what is included in your payroll system. For instance, in this position, I was called like a regional HR manager, right? But in actuality, I was an HR director. In the industry or in the field of HR, those two are totally different positions because they hold different responsibilities. So you have to make sure that you either combine them or use the one that is most relevant for the position that you're applying for. Okay. In your skills area, just make sure you have about at least 9 to 12 listed there. Same thing with your bullet points. You want to make sure that you have them a little streamlined, a little more concise, combine bullet points where you can. But whatever you're going to show, unless you're showing relevant measurements or metrics, it's not really going to be as relevant. For instance, I could list on here everything that I've done in this position, but that's really just giving them a list of tasks, right? And they already know what tasks I need because it's listed in their job description. So they can look at their job description to see what the tasks were. What's important is that I'm showing them measurable achievements or the things I am most proud of achieving while in this position, which is why you'll see a lot of numbers in this resume. US across 15 states, decreasing from 23% in 2022 to 8% in 2023. Driving an outstanding 82%. Finalization rate of 80%. Engagement scores by over 20%. I'm telling them things I achieved. Speak to your achievements and explain what you did to reach that achievement. And that's what they're looking for. So after you've hooked them with your summary of your branding statement, if you hook them there, next they're going to want to look at your metrics. Okay, she did all of this. What did she do? The more time you can get buy-in into them reviewing your information, the better your chances of getting moved on to the next round of interviews. So I don't typically like a lot of bullet points unless it's telling a story. In that first video, I told you that young lady had way too many bullet points. I think in one of her jobs, she had 15. Way too many, and you didn't discuss any of your accomplishments. As you can see here, I'm discussing my accomplishments. So that's why I have so many bullet points. But typically, I would never have that many. Okay. Also, after I give the title of what it was that I did, the title I held, I gave just a really quick 1-sentence summary of what I was accountable for in that department. That's another thing that's going to help push them through your resume. Giving them a brief summary of what you did or even what that company did. Because in some instances, if you don't have the experience by title, you may have the experience by job description. So if you can tie those two together, especially if you're trying to go into a different industry or a different field, that's going to be extremely relevant. Okay. All right. So I've given you that 1 to 2 sentences explaining what it is that you've done. Typically, 1 sentence is enough. And again, down here, I'm giving a few measurables, probably just one measurable, because this was a different type of position. In this position, I oversaw a lot of people who were hitting their achievements. I didn't have a lot of achievements to hit, but I did oversee a lot of functions or a lot of things that had to go through the process. I oversaw processes for various companies. So that's where that would fall into play. So here I don't have to speak to what I actually accomplished because I'm telling them that I managed a lot of things within this role. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Now, because I don't like gaps within my resume, I added this position with this company. But it was also because I have a couple of measurements that I can give them. Training services had very little to do with HR, but there are some HR things in here. So I highlighted those things as well as gave them a couple of measurable things that they can see that even though my experience or exposure in HR was limited in this role, I still helped HR out. I did still have HR initiatives, and I also had some achievements in that position. So you always want to make sure that you lead with your accomplishments and then follow everything else. You also want to make sure that you're using action verbs, right? Use your action verbs. So in this role, I directed, I achieved, I spearheaded. Spearheaded is not a word that we typically use in conversation. Find some action verbs that stand out. Action verbs that are not what you would typically speak with or even use, right? I don't use spearheaded in regular conversation, but what that says to the recruiter is that I was the head or I oversaw whatever that was I'm speaking to. I established, I led, I pioneered, I revamped, I delivered. Use action words that are not typically used. Then talk about how you did it or why you did it, and then give your results. That's the easiest way to make sure that you're hitting what those metrics are and you're highlighting your experience. Also, make sure that your tense is proper. So if this is where I was currently working, I would say direct global, achieve significant, lead successful, establish. It wouldn't be past tense, it would be present tense. Leading, pioneering, revamping, delivering. And as you see past tense, you're going to use the ed. It's past, so you're going to speak to it as something that's been in the past. That's very significant, very important. And just catching those small things for the recruiter, it's going to show that you pay attention to detail. Okay. Again, I can't say how important it is to prioritize whatever it is your metrics were. Your most impressive accomplishments should go first. Okay. Now, what's debatable is where education should fall. A lot of resumes start with education at the top. I put my education at the bottom because for me, I believe that my experience is more relevant than what the education is, right? That's just one part. But another reason I put my education at the bottom is because I've already hit them at the top with it. This MS LHRD, yeah, that signifies that I have a master's in some realm of HR, which stands for leadership HR development. But I've already let them know I'm educated. I have a master's degree. So if that role calls for master, that's already checked off. They don't even have to look at my education, but you still want to include it. But I put it at the bottom because I've already highlighted it at the top. So there was no need to have it at the top. I want them to focus on my area of expertise, my technical skills, my professional summary, and that experience, because that's what's most relevant. But let's go back down to education. When you put your education, you will notice I do not include years. You will also notice I do not include high school diploma. If you have a bachelor's degree, you do not need to include high school diploma. Okay? So as you can see, my bachelor's degree is there, master's of science, and then my doctoral degree. I'm still in the process of obtaining that degree. So I'm going to give them a conferral date. And that's because if they run my background, depending on what system they use, if I don't give them a conferral date, it's going to show that I haven't graduated with my doctoral degree. Therefore, I look like a liar. However, if I can give them a conferral date, that lets them know I'm working on it. Sometimes they'll pull your records and the schools will report and say, yeah, you're currently a student. They may even ask for a document or a letter saying that you're currently enrolled. There's different things they can do to verify. However, I'm going to give them a conferral date because it's not yet achieved. And I want them to understand if they run my record, it probably won't show up. Okay. And then business affiliations. This is important in some instances, not all, but in some, depending on what level you are in your job or your field, because it shows what kind of influence you have. If I'm on a board, I have to have a level of influence because we vote on things. We have conversations about things. We make decisions that impact whatever that organization is. So if you are a part of any professional association, my recommendation is to include it. And as you can see, I also put down there all of the other associations I'm affiliated with. just because I'm an overachiever and I like bragging on myself. You don't have to have all of this. For me, it's relevant because of the type of roles I go after. Okay. So the main things I want you to take from this, if you have a LinkedIn, add it. Make sure you are using consistent fonts throughout your resume. Make sure that if you have excessive bullet points, you're highlighting specific achievements. Start with your strongest skill. Start with your highest and most relevant achievement as you go through this, and then trend it all the way down. Okay. Keep your resume 1 to 2 pages if possible. Using that font, that 10.5 is always going to ensure that your resume is conducive. Watch your margins. Spell out all acronyms. Okay. And keep it clean, keep it simple. We do not need your photo on your resume. Your name is sufficient. Use a zip code if you're comfortable. Don't necessarily have to have it. And make sure that your email address is professional, or that is at least not ratchet. And I hate to say that word, but you know what I mean. That's just a couple of things. Also, give them an email address that you're going to check. I recommend creating one specifically for job searching, because nothing's worse than getting a bunch of spam and things you've signed up for and you've applied for these jobs under that email account, and someone's emailed you back and you've missed it because of all the other stuff that blogs and clogs up your email. So make sure, I would recommend, if at all possible, if it makes sense for you, go ahead and create a new email account so that you don't have to worry about missing an email. Make sure that you have a phone number on there of a number that you're going to answer. Make sure your voicemail, oh, that's a big one. If you accept voicemails, make sure that message is professional. Use the automated message. If you're going to use your voice, make sure it's professional. I don't need to hear any music playing in the background. I don't need to hear, if I don't recognize your number, I'm not picking up. No, all of those things. That's a turnoff. That is a turnoff, and it will eliminate you from being considered. Okay. All right. I hope that this makes sense. I hope that you have learned something. I hope that I've provided information that was insightful. Hopefully. I'll probably do another resume walkthrough one day this coming week. It'll be a different resume, obviously. And I'll just keep pushing them out for you. So, talk to you soon. Bye.